Welcome to Soapbox Psychologists.
It is our mission to make work, career growth, and teaming fulfilling, fun, fruitful, and more awesome. To do that, we gotta unbox, unstick, and buck paradigms, barriers, and socialization hand-me-downs that get in the way. And we have to challenge the way the psychology of work is perpetuated.
We invite you in to challenge, ignite, and excite together with us, your two Soapbox Psychologists.
Michelle Minnikin, the work pirate extraordinaire.
And the most awesome devil's advocate for talent, Elizabeth Lembke.
What are we going to talk about in these videos? We are going to be your Agony Aunts, so bring us your conundrums to tackle.
And we're going to be making the psychology of work accessible and meaningful as Soapbox Psychologists to do better.
As co-captains, we take what we know as work and cultural psychologists, corporate HR, island survivalists, and salty professional females to help shape, identify, and navigate together with you better routes through these stormy seas. Thank you.
So the blankets are here and your agony ants are as well.
It's June.
It's June and we still need our blankies because it's cuddled in our office working from home.
Yeah.
And I'm not even in England.
No, it's supposed to be warmer in Germany.
It's supposed to be warmer in Germany. Darn that. All the heck. Well, welcome. We are so excited that you have rejoined us for the Soapbox Psychologists. Today, we're coming to you as your favorite blankie-wearing agony aunts.
Agony nanas.
Agony nanas. I love it. Okay, so what should we be talking about today, Michelle? What do we got on our table?
So, we're going to talk about human resources.
Human resources. Ooh, is that like the resources I have in my cubby, in my garden tool shed, in my bank account? Human resources?
No, we're going to talk about actual humans that are considered resources for organizations.
Well, this is so fascinating. I loved how we call it human resources, just like tools that we actually talk about people as if we can just plug them in and play, that they're on a shelf just waiting for us to call them in.
Yeah.
Ready to go and ready to play.
With a unique set of skills.
Yes. And so is this kind of like where we say with the talent pipeline, it's the right people at the right time with the right capabilities? Oh, what a brilliant
In the right
idea.
seats.
In the right seats. What a brilliant plan. So how's this been working for us thus far, Michelle, over the last 120, 150 years?
Not well, I would say. So if you look at what would measure this? Would we look at engagement? Would we look at productivity? Would we look at sick leave? What would
we look at? Trust?
Medication?
Exactly. Burnout, people feeling not valued at work and like cogs in a wheel.
And the Great Resignation.
So there's apparently a lot of things that we could look at when we think about the perhaps the detriments to calling people human resources, like they're a supply chain commodity.
Not actual living sentient beings.
But do we want living sentient beings to work for us? When we're trying to
control.
They are hard to control, but if we're talking about innovation, if we're talking about collaboration, if we're talking about passion for excellence, those somehow don't resonate with this whole idea of a plug and play off of a shelf. I get you when I need you, and when I don't need you, I put you right back on the shelf and don't want to have anything to do with you. So
think
where does
what
this
we're
all come
saying-
from? So where does this idea of human resources come from, and why is it problematic, particularly in our times? What do you think, Michelle? Or what do you know?
Well, it's a weird one, really. So
Mhm.
as a profession, it used to be called personnel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I find
Just
that
like
slightly less offensive.
controlling. Yeah, I agree. I think the whole thing of like personnel, it was, and this all started with basically with the Industrial Revolution, and personnel, as we were talking about comptrollers, here, what's the compensation that's going to be given to the employees for doing said work? And then it changed to human resources, and then the even worse one, human capital, which there's a huge discussion, even when they originally were bringing out the topic, that no, we really don't mean in terms of like people as commodities. So when they were actually bringing out the original paper to introduce the topic of human capital, it was already problematic. And that was back in the 50s. And so, yeah, and human resources, human capital, the problems that existed with this terminology, that really got popular after, Frederick Taylor, and everyone was really excited about manufacturing and operational efficiency, and how do we utilize the human resources in the most optimal way so that we really have the best use of capital. These were the ideas behind the nomenclature. And yes, they've always been problematic, but nowadays, where it's about innovation, it's about collaboration, it's about how are you engaging with understanding what your customer needs, this whole aspect of plug and play, everyone's replaceable, has become a little bit problematic.
Yeah. So what is the core purpose of human resources? What is the point of having that department, that person in an organization?
I think and this is really where it comes back into, you're discarding out with the term personnel. So if we think about what is that role helping the personnel to be, I'm assuming that this aspect of staffing, training, being able to be a productive member of the team, and making sure that people got paid on time, had benefits for working, and did not leave work worse off than they got in. I think those were kind of the original ideas behind personnel. I may be wrong, though.
I do wonder, in terms of the core purpose, is it to protect the organization?
Keep everything quiet. Go project to project.
Well, yeah. So is it, because I think it came out of finance, didn't it?
Absolutely. Comptroller would then split into, once finances got too difficult, they're like, okay, you guys take care of the people side, we'll take care of the reporting side.
So if it's a kind of risk to the organization management role, but then they also have almost a duty of care to keep their people safe, and to be safe and productive, and wring every last ounce of value out of people.
Yeah. So this whole thing of the commodity aspect of the resources, you want to optimize your resource use so that you do not have any waste around too many people on board. As we all know, anyone who's been downsized, etc., it's always training personnel. What are those levers that, as an organization, that you can control your costs? And unfortunately, personnel is usually one of the first things they go after.
It's crackers, isn't it?
It is. Well, and to come back to your question of what's the purpose behind the role of someone looking after people in an organization? Why do we need it? A lot of organizations are saying, oh, we can outsource this. We don't need any specific person looking after the quality of life at work? What is that purpose of the role?
So you've got, if you look at that outsourcing, you could have your sort of employment lawyer type of people. You've got your processy type of people. So these are the processes that we will now pin everything on. But I think that protecting the organization and protecting the people, that dual purpose clashes, because who is really the stakeholder of your HR director? Is it people, or is it the board? Is it the stakeholders?
Well, and I think that this is the piece where a lot of people have come to, like, oh, can we rename human capital, human resources, and now we're calling the people and culture officer. So all of these things come into kind of the echo of, is there a police person protecting and serving so that things remain quiet, and that there aren't any huge ripples, rather than how are we helping? And this is kind of our whole things as social work psychologists, is how can we help people not only survive work, that would be the minimal, but how do we help them adapt, thrive, and flourish at work? And that, is the approach of why does work psychology and organizational psychology exist, as to how can we help make people's lives better at work? And if we know something out of our research, why aren't we implementing it? So here, this whole aspect of what is that role of the people and culture, not as a police person, but to say, how are we enabling so that people can flourish at work?
Yeah, it seems like it just definitely seems like two core jobs in one: the police and the developer.
The police, well, and this is, I don't know, I mean, we talk about that we are both corporate HR island survivalists.
Yep.
And I think this was a really a big problematic piece, because when I was starting in, a lot of the people who had a career as HR directors or et cetera, we had a real hard time discussing or understanding what is the role of developer, because they were hired on mainly to keep things quiet around. They were a majority of them specialized in labor law or in compensation. So these two things around, okay, how are we managing the 99 to the 1%? So keeping things quiet, making sure that the litigation issues were as minimized as possible, keeping in line with the unions, and and making sure that people got paid at the end of the day, which in my opinion those are like kind of core. Those should be part of the people role, but they should not be the people role. This whole aspect of how do we understand work beyond a job description that has been aligned with the unions or with the government for a pay scale. That's where people are going, because no one has a job like they did even 10, 15 years ago. The pace of change and what people are being asked to do, the continual learning, the aspects of how do we integrate technology with co-creation, et cetera, those are well and way beyond the things that we negotiated with unions, way back 10, 15 years ago. But yet, how is it for you? When we were recruiting, people would just pull up an old job description, say, okay, this laundry. Exactly. That will do. Laundry list. That should be the same. And then this whole aspect of how do we get it through and get it approved, rather than what's the work that these people will be doing? How will they grow? How will they evolve? Who will they be working together with? And what does good look like in terms of how do we understand the purpose of why we exist and why we want to collaborate as a team? Which are the funner pieces, in my humble opinion, around the people and culture role, which is really this aspect of how do we continually develop, grow, and learn as an organization, and that the personnel function, I'm just going to go back to that old school word that you brought in, is really about how do we help folks adapt, thrive, and flourish by gaining new skills, understanding different needs, and really being that listening for the organization. How do you see it?
If we had to almost redesign organizations, and I know there was a lot, I would say in the 90s, 2000s, about the sort of the Ulrich model of,
yes, oh my goodness, how many restructurings happened after that Ulrich HR business partner role.
Yeah. And I think what was interesting is we did a lot of development of managers to take some of that stuff that was typically HR.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we expanded the managerial role.
Yeah, hugely so.
They had some more responsibilities. So instead of saying, "Oh, this is a people problem," HR will deal with it.
Exactly.
You
go into that closed room.
Yeah. Help them take that responsibility. But I think there was a bit of like HR people going, "Oh no, I like that because it's more power and control for me." But yeah, I don't think it's just one job. I think if we trained people who managed people in a more sort of coaching style rather than command and control style,
yeah, absolutely,
there would be significantly less problems in organizations.
Absolutely. This whole piece of, what do you need to do to be successful? What are the barriers in the way, and what can we do about them? And how do we leverage the strengths of the things that we need to build upon? If that was kind of the original purpose and idea of why we have leaders in organizations, it would look very, very different, or it does look very different. There's some really great examples of organizations that are doing this well. For example, some work pirates clients, for example, around how do we redefine that role of a leader, or there's this, are you a leader? Are you a manager? And it's like, oh goodness gracious, can we please have a different discussion here? Sorry, that was a side soapbox.
Yeah, it's like that's going to have to be one as well. I think we'll put that on the list.
Exactly.
We'll talk about put that on the list. But yeah, there's
but this whole thing of like, how are we? Yes, we did this whole HR as a service, and we had these wonderful HR tech where we like shoved all of this stuff onto the managers of what they were doing anyway, and said, "Oh, please, you take care of that." And then people were going into these portals and basically doing their own timesheets and getting all of those things then sent to them, which is fine, and that's all good. But the real aspects, to your point, around what is that coaching role of the leader, and here, how are we enabling strength within organizations where it's not this in-group, out-group, it's not me versus them, but what is our collective kind of purpose for existing as an organization, that my talent doesn't belong to me as a manager because I have the cost center for this person, but really truly to say, okay, why does a customer want to work with us? What are the things that we help enable our customer to do so that they can better serve their customers? What's the job to be done? How are we thinking about not just falling in love with our products, but really understanding what's the drivers behind our market, and how are we staying on top of things and looking outside of our own internal like belly gazing. And this, to your point, this is the developmental role. This is the fun part. This is the piece of, it's really a curiosity-based approach to say, how are we continually learning, growing and integrating? So, and this to, what you were saying before around that fear of those were the things we liked to control, now we're giving them up. And I think a lot of this whole discussion around, do we call ourselves HR? Do we call ourselves human capital? Do we call ourselves now people and culture? It's skirting around the real issue is we have to change what got us here won't get us there. Back to that book title of how are we learning alongside? How are we growing to expand? And how are we enabling the learning culture thing that we've been espousing if we don't start with ourselves? Yes. So this is, so for me, and I would be interested here to talk about this with you. One of the things that when I'm working on HR professional development, because I just call it HR, because I'm like, I don't care what we call it. At the end of the day, it's about how are we enabling people within organizations. So
people enablement.
People enablement, exactly. I love it. So that will be what we'll call it. People enablement, the people enablement roles. Where have you had the biggest kind of like learning leaps in your advice to HRs moving away from these are the security pieces, this is what we controlled, we kept things quiet, and now we're moving into the development? What for you have been those biggest learning leaps of the people that you work with?
I think it's that power over, power within thing.
Yeah.
I think that's probably been one of the biggest things, that if people are sitting around waiting to be told what to do, to be given permission to do things, to be assigned tasks, they're always going to look externally for what to do. They're never going to develop their own sense of curiosity. And that piratey act and seek forgiveness rather than asking for permission thing. But it starts with us. So while we're in that sort of mindset of a good employee, where we're just sitting around to be directed, until I kind of dialed up the little bit of mischief and curiosity that is so innate within me, and I think I had to do it because I was drowning as an employee, because the processes were too different. Everything was just too hard to actually achieve anything. So finding those helpful people and those ways of circumnavigating the very wasteful processes. So I think it took me to be I gave myself permission just to get shit done.
And I think that is really, if I look at that, where the biggest learning leap of the people that I've been working with, I would see that piece as well, is that like I had to you have to figure out how do you get stuff done, how do you break through barriers that are completely unnecessary, how do you question things that are no longer fit for purpose, and seeing that you have the power. And I think that whole aspect of people self-editing to believe that they couldn't. I worked for plenty of leaders, as you probably did as well, who said, I don't understand why not more ideas are coming. Everyone's empowered. I have an open door policy, but nobody's coming in. And it's like, well, you got to start a little bit earlier, because there's this piece called workplace socialization that we've been drilling into people for a number of years as to where do I have my safety and puffer zones. And like our friend Mandy Choi says, people are really good at maintaining their employability. They know exactly where the boundaries are in terms of, okay, I can push it this far, but if I push it beyond that, then I have fear of losing my job, etc. And, we need to pay our bills. And so a lot of people, this self-editing to say, okay, I'm going to stay within this zone of employability rather than push.
Madness.
Yes. Instead of pushing up against the brave zone of saying, okay, what can we go into? And if you want innovation, you want people who ask questions. You want people who co-create and build upon others' ideas rather than the protectionism. And this is where, for me, that whole aspect of human resources, how are you leveraging the capital that we have invested? It's all about protecting resources and minimizing the resource use. And so this whole expansive thinking of how do we think beyond a full-time equivalent? How do we think about the resources that we have in terms of an abundance? There are other ways. And so how do we think about the utilization of what we have is not just what we have on our payroll. And we spent a lot of money on administration and a lot of money on these things that really don't make sense. And if we were just to ask the question, what are the barriers that are getting in the way? Does this make sense? Does this even fit to the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish? Questioning things. And then if they're not fit for purpose, what would be? And design around that and design for that. So designing, starting with your purpose, starting with your mission, and understanding why your organization even exists and why you would want to work there and how that fits. Those are very different questions than to say, how do we have a supply chain of capital in order to just in time deliver mass production? Sure, absolutely. It was very helpful and fit for purpose in the times of the Industrial Revolution. But these times have now changed. And therefore, with that, so does the personnel and the people and culture role.
Yes, so we've changed it to people enablement.
Exactly. So people enablement. So with that, these were your two Agony Aunts with their blankies and their cup of tea.
I've got water. Yeah.
All right. Ideas.